Ministry has a way of surrounding you with people while quietly leaving you alone. For many pastors and leaders, the deeper the responsibility grows, the fewer places there are to be honest. You carry the weight, manage the crises, and hold it together for everyone else. And somewhere along the way, your life gets thinner. Fewer friendships, fewer safe conversations, and less room to admit when things are hard. That isolation doesn't disappear when ministry changes, and in many cases, it actually gets worse. So today, we have a conversation with Don Ross, a former pastor who spent 2 decades in vocational ministry before stepping out and learning firsthand how dangerous isolation can be during transition. Talk about why churches struggle to engage men, why so many leaders carry shame silently, and why no man, especially in transition, was meant to walk alone. If you're navigating a season of uncertainty, pressure, or change, this episode isn't about fixing your life. It's about making sure you don't face it by yourself. Don Ross, Manhood Tribes. I can't even wait. Welcome to the Life After Ministry podcast.
Matt, thank you so much for having me, man. I'm really pleased to be here. Excited to get to chat with you today and hopefully bring some benefit for your listeners.
Yeah, so if we have females listening to this, should they just cut out right now, or is there something in it for them?
Definitely not. Yeah, there's good stuff here for everybody, obviously aimed at men, but as I think we all know, more often than not, as guys, the things that make a real difference in our life often come to us from the women in our lives. So, tune in, ladies. There's probably some ways to be able to help the guys around you.
That's right. This is the one that you're going to want to send to your husband or the boyfriend or the pastor in your life, whoever that might be. So, well, hey, good. We met through a shared community, and excited to be able to share a bit of your story today. And we're going to focus in a little bit on this idea of what is it like to be a man? Why is it hard to be a man? My wife says it's really easy to be a guy. I'm not sure what she says by that, what all that means, but I want to dig in to your story a little bit. You're coming from a ministry, you've transitioned, you lived to tell, but give me a little bit of your background as a pastor in a church.
Yeah. So I actually, I'll kind of start in college. I went to college planning on being a doctor, but got involved in a campus ministry while I was there and just absolutely fell in love, not just with Jesus, but actually with ministry as well. And so decided to change course late in college and then went into ministry kind of right after college. That was a wild transition, a really different life path than what I was expecting, but one that was really good. So I actually started out working for that college ministry for a while and then got into church ministry later on. Went to seminary, did all the things. But I worked primarily in, I'd say large, multi-site evangelical churches, non-denominational community church, kind of things. And did that all in total for about 20 years. So I was, in the world, in the sphere of vocational Christian ministry for a long time. There were things about it that I loved. There were things about it that were unbelievably hard. And what I found really kind of at every place that I was doing was that I was drawn to working with men, whether that was actually my job or not. That's what I really, really enjoyed doing. And also just where I saw that there was tremendous need, that most ministries and churches were really struggling to reach men and weren't really giving it a whole lot of time and effort either. So, trying, kind of giving a lip service and being disappointed when the lip service didn't work all that well. And so I just kind of began to see like, hey, I think there's probably some ways to be able to do some of this better. And over time, I created some things that I think were working, but just didn't find the opportunity to really be able to do what I wanted to do within the local church context. And so things kind of came to a head at the end of that journey where I sensed from the Lord, it was really probably time for me to move on from vocational ministry to be able to do what I wanted to do more on like a digital platform. And at the same time, like after 20 years in ministry, there was a lot of baggage that I was carrying around from my time there. And so I was both like ready to move on and excited about kind of a new opportunity. So about 4 years ago, I stepped out of vocational ministry, actually jumped into digital marketing as a way to try to learn how to do some things that would help me in sort of building this digital men's platform, and have been doing that ever since. So yeah.
So I want to skip over all of the fun, great, easy stuff that's part
Yeah,
of
that's great.
ministry, and you described it as unbelievably hard. I like to let's lean in on that. So let's connect with the people who are listening who are in that space right now where it feels unbelievably hard. What was that like for you?
Yeah. So there were a few things that were unbelievably hard. I actually was listening to a podcast just recently, and I feel like they kind of described it well, which was that 90% of church ministry was two things. It was preparing for and executing Sundays, right? Your weekend service kind of stuff, and then dealing with whatever crises were coming up in the church, whether that was your congregation's personal crises that were hitting the fan, or staff issues or budget issues, or whatever was going on in the church. It was just kind of like crisis level. There was always something to manage. And then in the leftover 10% is where you maybe got to actually do some ministry that you really enjoyed. So it was just this kind of constant rat race. It was exhausting. And I don't think for the most part, church organizations, church staffs do a really good job of paying attention to how exhausting that rhythm can be for their staff, and trying to care for their pastors and their staff members really well, just in light of like how difficult that actually can be to carry that weight and that rhythm and the emotional and personal burdens of the people around you. So it was just, there's a lot of exhaustion. But I would say like that's kind of like, that's normal ministry context. I think part of what was unbelievably hard for me, especially in kind of the larger, mega church, multi-site evangelical world, was some of just the way that system has been built over the past few decades in our culture. And I don't want to rail on it too hard, because there's tremendous good that has come out of that model as well. And so I don't want to just be overly negative. But one of the negatives that really just started to wear on me over time was that model is really built on the kind of celebrity pastor idea, that we've got one person that we're kind of platforming who is a really good teacher, communicator, whatever you want to call it, magnetic personality. Is very good at drawing people in and helping connect them to the faith. And that's not a bad thing to be. But what ends up happening is that the organization really kind of builds itself around that person, and that person becomes the focal point, and then everyone else just sort of becomes a cog in the machine to keep the machine running, to prop that person up. And I watched that mechanism be toxic and dysfunctional and harmful in lots of ways. And in some of those, I was a bystander to the carnage, and in some ways, I was a victim. And it just got to the place where it was like, okay, this is too much, and I've watched this pattern play out too many times. I can either continue to put myself right in the midst of it and expect things to go differently, which seemed, that's kind of like definition of insanity. Or I can choose to step out and just recognize that maybe just for a season, maybe for forever, I need a break from this particular rhythm and way of doing things before I, consider doing something like that again.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think it's a bit too universal, and we've seen it a few too many times. And that becomes not only hard for the people who are in the system watching how the sausage is made, but it also it gets difficult for the people who are looking on in it. I want to look at the manhood piece there for a second, because I know churches are trying to reach men. I know you're trying to reach men, and why is this such a difficult demographic? Like, I look at the stats, and it's way easier to get females to go to church. I actually was just talking to a church. Their primary focus is, we're going to hit the men, because if we can get the men, we can get the whole family. But why is it hard for guys? And specifically, why is it hard for churches to get guys in the seats?
Yeah. So I think there's a few reasons that that's true, but they kind of all boil down to the same thing, which is that most churches are doing ministry in a way that is geared towards the felt needs of women and the ways that women tend to connect. So I'll try to unpack that a little bit. If let's take groups ministry in particular, because this is kind of my specialty. It's probably the easiest one for me to talk about, but I think this has application to, just about any aspect of the church world, whether that's your weekend services, your kids ministries, your whatever. The same truths kind of hold place in all of them, but I think it's easy to see in groups ministry. Churches will complain up and down that, hey, we offer all kinds of groups, and but yet we've got probably double or more the number of women's groups than we have men's groups. And guys typically only come to a small group because their wife drags them along. Or, you hear these kinds of things all the time. It's really hard to get guys invested in a group. Even the guys who come to a group will complain about that they don't really like it. It's a near universal experience of church men who have been involved in a group that they've been disappointed by it. And so, what is this about? Like, why is this so difficult? So I think the big issue there is that most churches have used a model of ministry that's built around the ways that women think, work, connect, do all of those kinds of things. So, for example, women are hardwired, I think, and I say hardwired, like made by God, designed in such a way that they are more naturally geared towards social interaction than men are. That doesn't mean that men can't be social. That doesn't mean that there aren't, introverted and antisocial women. It just means the trend is there. Women tend to be better at social interaction. They tend to be motivated by social interaction. Women will get together simply for the sake of getting together, right? That's one of just kind of the felt needs of women in general. Men are not the same. Men do not typically get together just for the sake of getting together. Men tend to get together if there's an activity or some kind of action involved. Men get together to do something. And that's great. That's how God made men. That's how he created us. But yet, by and large, we have built a groups ministry that is really about getting together for the sake of getting together. We get together for social interaction primarily. Now, we do some things in that social interaction, but those things that we do are also geared towards the way the women tend to work. So primarily in small group settings, what we do is we read, we study, we learn, we are quiet, all things that tend to favor the way that women like to interact. Women tend to, and you can look at, this is not just church studies, this is educational studies of all kinds. Women feel like they have accomplished something when they have learned something. Men are not wired that way. And look, I'm not saying that like that's a bad thing. That's just part of the way that women are, and that's good. So they feel like if they go to a small group Bible study and they work through a chapter of Ephesians and they learn something new, by doing that study, that they've accomplished something. Men don't work the same way. We go through a Bible study like that and it's just extra knowledge. Men like to accomplish something that's going to add real value to our lives and that we can see the results of. And we typically don't get that from a informationally oriented Bible study or small group environment. So, you've got all these things that kind of play to that. There's other things there as well. Men tend to be hardwired for trust and women tend to be hardwired for emotion. Most of our small group environments focus more on emotion and take a long time to be able to get to building trust with one another. So there's those kinds of things. All of that goes into play, which is just simply to say we've created groups models that favor women. And so why would we be surprised that men don't want to show up to them? It's just when you look at the way that men are wired, they're wired for things like action and activity. They're wired for challenge and results. They're wired for trust. We don't tend to think of those things as how we need to build in the way that we do ministry to men. We just keep repeating the same old patterns that are more geared towards women. And then we wonder why men don't show up. And it's pretty obvious when you break it down that way. But I think most pastors, most church ministries don't know how to optimize for the other direction. They don't know how to think about, okay, well, if those are the felt needs of men, what does that mean we need to do for our groups? Hardly anybody knows how to answer that question. So that's kind of the question that I've tried to answer, is to say, what does that type of group or type of ministry actually look like that does build around the felt needs of men? And let's see if we can go after that.
Well, and it seems like when you are in church ministry, if you see something like there's the men's retreat that takes place annually, and you learn a lot about a church culture by how they promote and advertise that retreat, right? Like,
right. Yeah.
I remember like ours was men don't retreat, we camp. And so we had man camp, and that says something, right? And there's like, We had a T-shirt with like a bear on it mauling another man. Like it, I mean, or it's like axe
Yeah.
throwing, and it's
Yeah.
like it. And some guys are looking at that, like, you go there, and some people, they're bringing their guns, they go down to the shooting range, but some guys are like, I think I'd just rather read or something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And so you have like this wide spectrum that if you are this kind of man, then you belong at this kind of camp, and if you don't, then maybe you shouldn't come. And so there's this spectrum, and it's a little bit hard for like guys to show up because we're trying to like hit this stereotypical like manly man. In fact, you have a resource that is, I think it's How Manly Are You? Is that true?
That's right. Yeah. It's a free quiz that I do. You can actually find it online at howmanlyareYou.com. It's just an easy way so within my ministry, I use something called the 5 marks of manhood, which are the things that we kind of say, this is what it looks like to be a man. And the quiz just helps you evaluate yourself along those 5 marks. Where are you doing well? What are some things that you could stand to grow in? And then how to get some resources that may help you with taking some next steps at kind of challenging yourself and growing those areas. But yeah, I hear you when it comes to like what you're talking about with the men's retreat. Do we have to go full on macho in order to be able to get the men to something? And look, I'm not opposed to that. Like that can be a great event. I've been to a whole bunch of those kinds of men's retreats. I've helped design some of them myself, and they can be a lot of fun. They can be a great way for men to just get out and do some things that they don't normally get to do, and that can be really, really good. The problem is that most of those retreats where they fail is not in the event themselves, but in what every pastor is really hoping for is okay, how do we connect these guys from the retreat into whatever the next step is, small groups or serving opportunities or, you name it. And it almost never works. And that's because the event that you're attracting them to is nothing like the environments that you're trying to push them into, because that event might be designed around the felt needs of men. It might feel manly to them, but all those things you're trying to connect them to they're not manly at all. They're not built around the ways that men connect, the ways that men think, the ways that men do. And so, you're trying to connect dots that in a man's mind don't exist. He'll look at that and go, one of these things is not like the other, right? It's pretty obvious to him. It just isn't very obvious to pastors. And so I think that's kind of part of the challenge that we have to figure out.
I'm sure the marks of men, there's probably ones I can assume, fatherhood or being a good husband, but what's one that might surprise people? Like I'm thinking like strong back hair.
You're going to be surprised by all of them. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's actually not.
Tease it out.
Okay. One of them is allegiance. Okay, so that's one that might surprise most guys. But we talk about allegiance as a mark of manhood because that's what it means to relate to the authority figures in your life. Every man has to figure out how to navigate an authority structure in his life, whether that's as a boy, you're talking about dealing with your parents, your teachers, your coaches, your whoever. But then as a man, that turns into your boss, your organization, your government, your whatever. And those things, they're a mark of manhood because they will largely affect not only what your life looks like, but also what the life of your family looks like. If you choose to give your allegiance to people or to things that aren't treating you well, aren't serving the mission and the goals of your life, then that's going to affect your family too. That's going to pull them in some directions that maybe you don't intend for them to go, but you've given your allegiance in that direction. And that's just, that's how culture works. There's other things that are involved in allegiance as well. Obviously, our ultimate allegiance, which is about our relationship to God. But then there's things too that are like dealing with addiction. Addiction is a form of allegiance where you've given yourself over to something that now has control of you and you are no longer in control of yourself. So this thing that has become your master begins to dictate what your life looks like and the choices that you make and how you make your decisions and spend your time and your money and everything. So there's all kinds of, aspects of that go into what it means to be a man that I think most guys don't spend a lot of time thinking about.
Yeah. So let's dig on that just for a second, because I do think that the addiction piece, that it comes from a lack, it comes from a searching. We find ourselves sometimes in the wrong things. And you have told your story in relation to pornography, and the piece of the addiction is that oftentimes, if it's a bad addiction, most addictions are. I'm assuming you could be addicted to something that would be good, but there's a point where everything can devolve. But those addictions really isolate us, and guys tend to be loners. In fact, your mission is that no man should ever have to walk alone, right? And tell me the role of addiction, shame, even pornography, and what that does. Because you and I have talked before, and I told you, like, I was at a pastor's conference where the guy in the bathroom at a pastor's conference dropped his phone in the stall next to me, and it was on the ground, and it was pornography at a pastor's conference, right? And so,
Right.
pastors are not immune, but what is that? How does that really kind of continue the isolation and further the problem that we're seeing, even in the pastoral community?
Yeah, absolutely. So, ironically enough, I was at a men's retreat one time when I heard a speaker say this: if you've got a penis, you've got a problem. It is the just universal reality in our culture right now that men are dealing with this issue of pornography. Well, women are dealing with it too, but not near on the scale that men are. It's almost 100%. 95, 98%, depending on which study you look at. It's cross-cultural, no matter your race, demographic, socioeconomic status, like, it's affecting all of us. And I think the biggest weapon of the enemy there is exactly what you named. It's just shame. It's that because of the way that we use pornography and the way that pornography is built, it causes us to get lured in by the enticement and the thrill of it. But then it pushes us to places where we start to believe things about ourselves. And this was true for me in my own use of pornography, that I started to believe that I was a pervert, that there was something wrong with me, that I was less of a man because of what I was doing with pornography. And those beliefs are subtle. It's not like, there's some person on the screen, while I'm watching pornography that's yelling that at me. That's not, the message isn't directly coming from what I'm viewing. But it is seeping in, very casually, but very intentionally over time. But most guys, we don't talk about that. We probably don't have anybody that we could talk to about it. But even if we do, we're really, really avoidant of being able to, open up about that kind of message, to bring some vulnerability around the shame that we're dealing with, the messages that we're starting to believe, and just, what are the longings that are underneath there? Why do I keep going back to this thing? I'm not even sure that I like it all that much. It's occasionally thrilling and it makes me feel good, but all of the crap that I have to deal with on the back end of it is really not worth it. And I know that, but I keep going back to it anyway. So these are things for any man who's dealt with pornography. I'm not describing anything new here, right? This is the familiarity of the cycle. But it keeps us locked in a place of isolation because it is so difficult to talk about. And that's one of the things I talk about in my book, just how to break this cycle, is that really the only off-ramp here is that there has to be some form of bringing it into the light. Sometimes in the church world, we call that confession. But if that word is a hang-up word for you, don't use that. It really just means, like, you've got to find somebody that you trust, that you can talk about it with, and just be fully honest and name the things that you're dealing with and why you think you're dealing with them, and ask for some help. But merely being able to bring it out in the open, honestly, will begin to take some of the power of it away. It will disarm the shame. It will pull you out of isolation. And removing the threat of those two things is probably the biggest hurdle towards getting free of addiction. It's not going to happen overnight. It doesn't happen that way for almost any guy. But more than likely, if you can get over those humps, you're making it pretty far down the road towards the victory that you're hoping for at the end.
We've had some marriage help. We've had two pretty pivotal moments in our journey where we really had to fight for our marriage. And I remember one of them, we got away for an emergency sabbatical for a period of time, and we had help from every side. They said, we're going to look at your life and your marriage like a house. There will be different windows. And so we had pastoral counseling. We had couples counseling. We also had just individual counseling for both of us. And then she had a women's group and I had a men's group. And it was fascinating to me that we walked in, and when we were going away to this place, I thought I'd be like in a hospital gown walking around where, everyone can see your butt. But we got there, and the men's group was very interesting because we walked in and we sat in a circle and they put a feeling wheel. You know, the feeling wheel is like,
Yeah.
it has like the whole, all of the emotions that we can't name.
Yeah.
And they put the feeling wheel on the floor. It's like a big blown up version of the feeling wheel. I thought, this is so interesting. They put it on the floor. And later on, I found out that like when guys get together in a group and they're sitting in a circle, we have trouble making eye contact. It's very easy to look at the ground. And so when we did, so the person facilitating said, well, we're going to put the feeling wheel on the ground because that's where everybody's looking anyways.
Yeah.
And then we can actually stop and talk.
You're going to stare at it whether you mean to or not.
That's right. So at least you're going to be looking at the thing that we're talking about. And what we're doing is we're looking at our feelings. So, that was one expression. And that was like, kind of getting thrown into the fire, and we were putting our lives back together in many cases. But you're all about, with Manhood Tribes, you want to help people get together. And not just people, but you want to help guys get together. And you're not necessarily even the ringleader where you're trying to pull a lot of guys around you, but you are helping guys bring together their own tribe, which is unique. What does that look like?
Yeah. So I have a what I call a coaching program, which just really means kind of exactly what you said, is that I'm not building a hey, come to me kind of thing. I'm building a let me help you be able to create the life-changing brotherhood that you've been hoping for all along, but you're going to do it in your local boots on the ground context. Because honestly, Matt, like, that's the kind of community. In order for guys to have the kind of community that they actually really are hungry for, it needs to happen locally. You need to be in physical proximity with these men around you in order for it to have the masculinizing and freeing effect that men's community really can have. That's not to say that there aren't good things that can come out of digital virtual community. I'm not going to just like toss that completely out. But the way that we're really designed for it and the way to get the most benefit out of it is it needs to be guys who are in your world. They're in your space and you can be around them physically on a regular basis. So so my thing is, hey, I will help you figure out how to lead this type of tribe community in your area. And I'll walk you through all the steps. I'll show you what that looks like, how to do it, how to get it going, what kind of guys to invite, all of those things. And then, after about 12 weeks or so, I'm going to send you out and you're going to be good to go. You're going to be equipped. You're going to know how to do it. We build tribe in a way that it is not curriculum dependent, the way that most men's groups are. So you're not going to be constantly struggling to find what's the next book that we need to read or video series to watch or, whatever. We, instead of giving you a curriculum, we give you a method. And you follow that method pretty much indefinitely. And it creates the rhythm that your group is going to go through so that you're never having to scratch your head over what are we going to do next. It's always right there in front of you. And you're never going to run out of options on how to be able to help each other continue to grow and get better as men.
I was an RA in college, resident assistant, and found that the best way to get guys together was do you know what Pizookies are? From like BJ's Pizzeria? It's like the
pizza cookie.
Yeah, the pizza cookie, right?
Yeah.
And then, so we just did that on a large scale. We got like lots of baking sheets and we just spread out a whole thing of cookie dough and a half gallon of ice cream. And you just drop it on the floor and tell the guys that it's up. And then they just like a pig's trough. They all just got together. They all felt horrible afterwards and they sat around and talked and laughed for the next couple of hours.
Yeah, it's a great memory. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe that's just, it's more complicated, but also more intentional than you just have to have food. Right?
Yeah,
like how do you break that wall for guys because I think what we want, but it's a thing that also scares the crap out of us, is we want a connection and we even want an emotional connection. Maybe it's even too vulnerable to say, like, I would never go up to and I have a couple good buddies, but I wouldn't go up there and say, I'd really like to work on my emotional connection with you. But what we want is, we want a close bond with other dudes. And we're just not necessarily sure how to get there.
Right. Or how to say it. What are the words around that, to be that guys can actually use? There's not many in our world. And so that's part of what makes it difficult. But, kind of like I said, it's understanding a little bit of the ways that men connect, right? The felt needs of men, and then just building things around that. So one of those is challenge. Men like to be challenged and they like to see results. So one of the things that we do is we build in what we call manhood challenges as a part of the regular rhythm of our group. So we take those 5 marks of manhood, and I know I didn't name them all before, but I'll give you the list. The 5 marks are strength, courage, skill, honor, and allegiance. So these things are all what I would call like morally neutral. They don't tell you what it means to be a good man, or certainly not a biblical man. They just tell you what it means to be a man. And there's ways to live them out that can, be shaped for good, that can be shaped in Christ-like biblical kinds of ways. But as long as any man is displaying those kinds of things, that's what it means to be a man. And I think that's kind of the definition that our culture, and especially the church, is really lacking right now, is that the church is trying to tell men, what does it mean to be a biblical man? And there's so much confusion in our world right now that guys are going, can we back the cart up a little bit and just talk about what does it mean to be a man? And maybe then you can tell me what the whole like biblical part of that actually looks like. But we've got some work to do on the front end that the church isn't doing enough, isn't paying enough attention to. So there's that piece of it. But then we take those things and we build challenges around that. So every month, I actually just did this last night with my tribe. Every month, we build challenges for one another on how you can get better as a man in one of those areas. What would it look like for you to grow in the area of skill, or to grow in the area of honor, or, pick whichever one you feel like you need to make some progress in. And we're going to help you build a challenge. So we had one guy in our tribe that said, he's never changed the oil in his car on his own before. And so that was his skill challenge, was that he wanted to learn how to be able to do that. We had another guy who has a son who's a senior in high school, getting ready to graduate and to move on. And he's realizing he's got some heavy duty conversations that he needs to have with his son that he hasn't had, but that he wants to make sure that he has those conversations with him before his son moves out of the house. And so that's a courage challenge for him. Like, these are going to be kind of awkward or heavy conversations. I'm not quite sure how to have those conversations, but I know I want to have them. I just need some help being able to make that happen. So, that's his courage challenge. So it can run the gamut on, what it needs to be, but it's helping you improve as a man. And by building in some things like that, it helps us to get to know one another. It helps us to move towards each other. We begin to build trust with each other because we're navigating just like real life things together. And doing those kinds of challenges is also just fun. It's fun to be able to work on some of those things with another buddy and see some things happen. The dad who's got the son is going to come back in a month and say, I had this conversation with my son, and here's how it went. And it was terrifying and it was awkward, and we laughed half the time, but I got to say some things to him that I never thought I would have said otherwise. And so I'm really grateful for that. Man, that is how men build connection. And so we just try to make it intentional. That's a part of what we do. That's not the only thing that we do, but it is a major part of how we build relationships with men that really matter.
So good. I love that. I just find myself pausing because I want to make sure people are listening. This might feel a little bit different than some of the normal podcasts that we have. And I'm doing this for a couple of reasons. Number one, I think when you are in a transition season, I think the tendency is to really go isolated. Like, you are
100%.
Walking in the wilderness and you're like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And I think that point of like, it really kind of hits all of these buttons for guys, especially, of like, for me, like to be a provider and not be able to do it. Like, I've said this multiple times, like the year I came out of ministry, I made $22,000. And that wrecked me. And then the money piece did not wreck my family as much as how it impacted me. My response to that is what really wrecked like my relationships in my family, right? Like that was, but we're talking to people. The people who are listening right now are in a transition season, or they're just making a decision that they're going to let somebody go, or there's a succession plan. There's something that's happening that's going to send somebody into that season. And I think it's good for us to pay attention to this. The other thing that I'm thinking is, you probably had moments, like you, Don Ross, had moments when you were a pastor where you probably thought, like me, I love this and I'll never stop doing it. Ever. Right?
Yeah. Yes, I want to speak to both of those things because you're dead on. And there, I'll be honest and say there's a big part of me that still misses pastoral ministry. That longs for it in some way, and I might go back to it someday. But yeah, I was in it thinking, this is really what I'm built for. Like, I love doing this. I love serving people in this way. I love growing in my faith through, the work that I get to do. Uh, there was so much of it that was tremendously fulfilling and satisfying. And at the same time, like burdensome, just like there were things about it that were awful. And it was hard to reconcile those two things. How can I be getting so much joy and so much fulfillment, and at the same time feel so miserable and so hurt? And that was really, really hard for me to reconcile. And then when I did, and I'll just go back to kind of what you started with there, I had to go through my own transition when I stepped out of ministry and tried to jump into digital marketing. I did not have a job lined up when I left the church. And so I kind of knew what my plan was, or what I was intending to do, but I didn't have it fleshed out. And so I had some months there where I had no job and no real, I was trying to make a career shift and had no idea how to do that. Like, go from one industry to another in my 40s. And what does that even look like? How do you do that? How do you jumpstart a whole new career? How do I make sure that I'm making enough money that I can support my family with this new career? And I'm doing it. I'm not doing it from a place of safety and security where I've got one job and I'm just looking for the next. I'm doing it from a place of, I don't have a job. And if I don't hurry up and get one, we're going to be in real trouble. And I will say, man, if I had not had my tribe with me in that season, I can't imagine, one, the devastation that I would have caused to my family from the just sheer panic and overwhelm and withdrawal, that I would have been going through. But two, I can't imagine the damage that I would have done to myself, because that season was super stressful. It was really, really hard. It was emotional in ways that I had never dealt with emotion in some places. But I had a group of guys that I could lean on. This same group of guys. I've been in this tribe now for 7 years, and this transition happened about 4 years ago. So, we'd been together several years already at that point. And this group of guys knew me. They knew the decisions that I had made that had led to that point, and why, I thought it was the right decision and that it was a good thing for me to do. They were behind me and they were supporting me. And every week we got together, and it was probably most weeks during that season that they just listened to me, if not complain, just the emotional equivalent of kind of bawling, of just sort of sharing this is freaking hard. Let me just be honest and say, I don't know how to handle this right now. I've gotten myself into a real disaster of a situation. Maybe I thought I was following God in this direction and I really wasn't. It was hard. It was really hard to tell up from down and, figure out my way through. But gosh, Matt, I made it through that season, and I made it intact, both, myself intact, my emotions intact, my family intact, largely because I had a group of guys around me who could help me stabilize, who could help me make sense of the world, who could tell me to hang on when it felt like there wasn't anything to keep hanging on to, who I knew were going to be there next week when I showed up as well. They were going to show up too. And that was enough to keep me, moving one step at a time and to get through that process. But good grief, without them, I it scares me to think about what that process would have looked like. But I know that that's what most men do in seasons of transition. They do it in isolation. They do it by themselves, and it probably wrecks them, because I can't imagine how it wouldn't have wrecked me had I not had that community.
So you go from that moment in ministry where you think, I could do this the rest of my life, and now you're in a totally different place. You went from pastoring to digital marketing, for goodness sake.
Yeah.
And I understand that transition. And now you're building tribes. Does it feel a little bit the same way? Do you love doing this? I guess the question behind the question is, do you feel fulfilled in your life after ministry? Does this feel good? Does it feel still like ministry? Or do you wish you could go back? I mean, not that this is easy, but does that fulfillment still follow years later?
Yeah, it's feeling closer and closer to real fulfillment. And I think some of that is that I'm still in the climbing up the mountain, grind stage of trying to get something going. And that stage is hard for anybody, whatever you're doing. That's hard for church planners who know that they're supposed to be planning a church. It's a hard stage. And so I'm kind of accepting the suck, so to speak, and just acknowledging that, like, at the same time, I really love doing this. Like, I'm excited about helping men be able to build their own tribe. Like, I know what a benefit tribe has been for me. I've watched it in other guys' lives as well. I've been able to help locally some other men start their tribes, and watching the transformation that takes place in guys' lives by being a part of this type of community is tremendously fulfilling for me. That's it's as close as to what I know to get as, the way that we use the word calling, really kind of a sense of like, this is really what God has built me for. It is fulfilling in that sense. I'm looking forward to the day when, I would love to leave digital marketing behind as a source of paid income and move into just doing this men's work. And I'm looking forward to a day when that might be possible. I think that will be even more fulfilling, but also harder in some other ways. There is more to come there, and I am looking forward to that. But it does feel like, I'm doing what God intended me to do. It's just a hard road to get to it. The transition is tough. I don't know that I expected it to be anything other than that, but I probably didn't expect it to take as long as I feel like it's taking. It's a process and a journey, right? And if I could paint the picture of what that journey would look like, it would look really different than it has. But we don't get to paint the picture. We just get to live in it. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think it almost shadow a little bit of C.S. Lewis. It's not easy, but it's good. And I think that is the process, and it becomes its own project in and of itself. I think if you're in transition, you need a tribe. I think if you're a man, you need a tribe. Men need to be in tribes, building tribes. And so I'd say if you're on the cusp of transition, you're not sure what's going to go on. I'd say start building your tribe, right? Start working on what that looks like. If you're in the midst of transition, you need a tribe. If everything in your life is going just fine, you need a tribe, because guys do better. We do better, and we live out our lives in a healthy way, in a more fulfilled way. Our relationships are more whole if we can do that with tribes. And there's something about guys being together that does something for guys that we can't accomplish in being in a marriage, as a dad. Like, we need somewhere else to go. Not that any of those are insufficient in and of themselves, but two things. One is howmanlyareyu.com. Did I get that right? Howmanlyareyu.com. I love domains. I have too many domains, but I love did you look that up and say, I can't believe it's not taken? And
yes, I was thrilled. I did not expect it to be there. But yeah, I snatched it up the moment that I saw it. I was like, it's mine.
So I can't wait now. I got to go check it out and see. I have pictures of what I think that website could look like. So that's fun. Howmanlyareyu.com. And then just to find out more about Manhood Tribes, what's the URL on that?
Yeah, it's manhoodtribes.com. The easiest way to honestly get into the Manhood Tribes orbit is actually to download that quiz, to do the How Manly Are You quiz. And that will get you, you'll start getting a little bit of information about what Manhood Tribes is, what some of our resources are, and help you take some next steps from there. So that's probably the best place to start.
Yeah, and I encourage the next steps. Don is accessible and he's available. If you email him, he emails you back, and you're not part of this big system. So I'd say engage fully. So Don, thank you for jumping on the Life After Ministry podcast, for sharing your life journey. And man, my prayers go out to you. And I pray that the people who are listening can connect with you, your story, and what you're doing. It'll make the world a better place.
Matt, thanks so much, man. This has been really great to get to be with you today.
One of the clearest truths from this conversation is that transition doesn't just test your calling. It tests your community. Isolation makes everything heavier. The shame grows louder and pressure compounds. And too many men, including pastors and leaders, they try to survive seasons of change by themselves, believing that somehow looks like strength. But it's not. If today's conversation resonated with you, take a few minutes to check out the show notes. You'll find links to Don's work with Manhood Tribes, including resources that are designed to help men build real, local brotherhood that lasts beyond a single season. And if you're a ministry leader and you're navigating transition, succession, or the aftermath of burnout, I invite you to visit ministrytransitions.com. We offer confidential conversations to help leaders move forward without losing themselves, their families, or their faith in the process. You don't have to have all the answers, but you do need people along the way. And the right community can make the difference between surviving transition and being reshaped by it. Thanks for listening. This is the Life After Ministry podcast.